This is Momentum, a podcast for momentum makers, where entrepreneurs, builders, and investors take the stage to share how they're making waves in their respective fields, creating the momentum for change and innovation. Your hosts, Tiffany Monaghan and Erica Cola, along with their guests, will deep dive into topics around entrepreneurship and emerging industries.
Welcome to another episode of Momentum Podcast. On this podcast, we talk with the people who are building and creating the future, so those momentum makers, as we like to call them. And I'm your host, Tiffany Monaghan. Our co-host, Erica, she's not here today because she has just had her first baby, a lovely baby boy. So congratulations to Erica. We'll miss her today. And that's why also Erica, who normally edits our podcast, she does the introduction. So we're introduction free today. We're just jumping right in, and I have a perfect guest to do that with. I'm joined here today by Barrett Wilson. So Robin, I would love it if you can introduce yourself for our audience.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Tiffany. I'm so excited to be chatting about fashion today. So a little bit about me. I am a fashion enthusiast, a technology expert, a former entrepreneur and designer, and all-around artist and travel enthusiast. So I've been doing this for a very long time, but I kind of live and breathe fashion. And I'm excited to talk a little bit more about what's going on in the industry today.
Amazing. And Robin, you and I worked together for many years at SAP, where you were the fashion expert at SAP. So I loved when the Business of Fashion reports would come out every year, and we were able to connect on them and talk about what the latest trends are. And this year, we just had the report released from Business of Fashion, and they just had their Voices conference, which was incredible as usual, and a lot of really great speakers. So there was a couple of topics I think would be very interesting for our audience here today. And one of those, and it was also one of the ones that you brought up first, so I want to make sure that we definitely talk about it, is that there's so much talk about Gen Z, millennial, who's the biggest spender, what's the biggest opportunity for fashion brands, and one aspect or one, let's say, pocket of consumers that's rapidly growing, that brands are recognizing there's an overlooked opportunity here, is what is being called the silver generation. So I'd love to start here and jump in with you, get your take on this.
Okay, so first of all, I hate the name.
You do? I kind of like it.
Oh, you do? I don't know. Yeah. I think it means that I need to have gray hair or something because I'm that generation. That's me. So there's a few things about this generation that I think speaks. So I'll talk about the pop culture side of it first, and then we'll talk about what it really means for fashion. So let's talk about the pop culture, right? So that silver generation is what they said, over 50, right? That was what Business of Fashion called it. So that's the demographic, 50 and older. I think when you say 50 and older to younger generations, they think grandma.
Which is definitely not the case.
No, because think of Nicole Kidman, my age. And I'm happy to tell everybody I'm 57 years old, proud of it. I'm 57. There are so many females and males in that 50 and over who are vibrant. We don't look like grandma. We work out every day. We eat the right foods. We limit how much we drink, but we are big spenders. We are making more money now.
Power.
Exactly. We're making more money now than we've ever made. These are the years where we will make the most income in our careers. We're homeowners, probably actually have more than one home. We do a lot of traveling. You remember I was in Paris and we didn't get to connect because I was there for business, but I was there for Paris for work. I extended, and what did I do? Lots of tours and visiting and spending money. I think it's a generation that is not talked to and taken for granted. So there's a couple of things we can kind of unpack on that, but I'll stop for a second and see if you have any thoughts.
Well, yeah, and I think that the fact is that this generation is not being talked to by brands, and brands right now are just starting to wake up. I think in the last few years, we've seen more and more, let's say, silver generation on the runway, even much older. And
Yeah.
we see some campaigns like Anthony Hopkins just did a campaign with Bottega, and you start to see older faces in the mix of also young people as well. And from my point of view, I think it's great because it creates a new sense of beauty, and
Mm-hmm.
you start to see beauty in different places. And from a brand's point of view, I mean, it's also a whole market that they can tap into that they really weren't speaking to before.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things about our generation that I think people forget about. Number one, we are early adopters. So about a year ago, it might have even been 2 years ago, but I think it was about a year ago, Women's Wear Daily came out with a whole beauty, they send a special beauty overview. And it was about this generation and how we're first to adopt technology if it works. If it
Okay, you
works.
need to break this down for me.
Right? So if it works, right? So we're the first to adopt an iPhone. We may not be the first to upgrade to the latest iOS, or whatever. But if it works, we will adopt it. We will try it. I mean, I have a Chat GPT assistant.
Yes, you
Absolutely. I
do.
named her.
Sage.
Yeah, Sage. I named Sage. Hey, by the way, I even went in Dolly and I built my avatar, right? I made her fashion. I made her art, technology. I mean, she's pretty cool looking, I got to tell you.
And
So
you think that your generation is adopting technology first over other generations like Gen Z or even
not first over, but we are first to use it and exploit it. So if we're gonna adopt the technology, we're gonna use it. We are gonna use it to the nth degree. We're gonna push it until it does everything we need it to do. I do think we are a generation. We are science based. So this beauty article that I was referring to, and then we'll talk a little bit about what Business of Fashion says, but this beauty article, if it's science based, so face creams, hair color, eyeglasses, clothing, sustainability, right? So when you think about our generation, I'm not going to use the latest and greatest face cream, but if it's got the science behind it, I'm going to use it. I am. We're the first ones to use Botox. We're the first ones to use fillers. We're the first ones to go gray, right? That wasn't the boomers. That's my generation. My generation said, you know what? I'm not coloring my hair anymore. I'm going to go gray. There's a beautiful model out there who at 41 years old, she was on the runway. She kept, having to color hair. She's got jet black hair and she finally said, forget it. I'm not doing it. She's got her own beauty brand now. She has reasons why she's developed certain beauty brands. We could also look at Bobbi Brown and her Jones Road beauty brand and how it's geared towards a more mature customer. We have the spending power, we do the research, and we do adopt. There's no doubt about it. So I started wearing the Aura ring. This is first generation.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes.
I
Now
don't
we're
know
on
anyone
generation
that's wearing
4.
it actually.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Huh.
and I, for a reason, I bought the Aura ring, not because I wanted to see my vitals. I was having trouble sleeping, and it has totally corrected my sleep to the point now where I wonder, do I still need it? Don't let Aura know
Okay.
that. But,
Yeah.
but that's my point. Like I run into people and they're now adopting the Aura ring. Oh, what do you think of it? I'm like, somebody asked me recently. I was 2 years ago, I was in Portugal on a trip and biking, and I had a gentleman say to me, so when did you adopt the Aura ring? And I said, oh God, let me go in and look. I can't even remember. I was one of the first adopters. So
That's pretty. And there's so as you're talking about this, there's two themes that I feel like stand out. So I wonder if you would agree with this, or what your take is really that, like, when you're talking about um, women who finally grow out their hair, they're okay with that they have gray hair, they're okay that they have white hair. There's like this authenticity. There's this aspect with the Jones Beauty, as Jones Road, right? It's called. There's an aspect there where it's like, I'm not trying to hide your aging skin. It's just, make it look more natural. That's kind of their messaging, and that's their branding. And
Yep.
then there's also, so that's like authenticity maybe. And then there's also this aspect of like health and monitoring and living a healthy life. And when you're talking about the science, like, I want to understand the science. Why is it beneficial? How can I use my ring? Do you feel that those two aspects resonate? Like, that's something brands maybe can look to say, this is how I can communicate with that generation?
I do. And I think it's missed, right? I do think it's missed. I think, there's no doubt about it. We're in the Instagram, everything looks perfect world, right? And everything's not perfect. And especially when you're at an older age, right? So you might be taking care of aging parents, or your children, you're dealing with empty nest, or you might be going through, your spouse has passed away. That happened to me. Or you're getting a divorce, and life is changing. And these are big, big rocks that happen in your life. And so you want to be talked to authentically. We've gone through some real stuff. And so, I don't want the fluffy, hey, this is all happy and wonderful and all of that. I want the real brass tacks. I want to know why I should be, why should I really love a brand? What about the brand that's going to speak to my values? And are you being transparent? Right? I want transparency. And that's, when it comes to, okay, I'm going to adopt a new skin product, or I'm going to try a new lipstick, or, maybe I'm not going to color my hair, or why am I going to do that? And it's going to be my reason. It's because of what makes my life easier and streamlined, because I'm probably a vice president, or you're making a big salary, or you've got a big household to take care of. There's all these things, but yet you want to enjoy life. And so you want the science, you want to be able to make a quick decision based on the facts, and you want to run with it.
Yeah. And this touches on two things that I wanted to talk to you about today. So first, the first thing, when you're saying, my generation has gone through a lot of different things in the world, and then also just at that stage of life, you have lived for a certain amount of time, that of course you've had life milestones that are personal, and there's also a lot that's been happening outside. The world that we're living in also feels very chaotic. And this morning I had been researching on Gen Z and how they behave as consumers as well. So they have a very particular way of consuming, and one of the ideas that came up was, almost like you're saying, it was this idea of nostalgia. So they're reacting to almost the same outside factors that have happened to them in their life, like COVID. We had 9/11. We had these economic insecurity. Right now we have that same economic insecurity again. And so while they're happening to the older generation, it's also happening to the young folks as well. Yet they're reacting in a way that they have a different reaction. Whereas you're saying, I want to be more scientific, brass tacks. The reaction that apparently we're seeing with Gen Zs is they want to be more nostalgic. They want to dig up the past, and that's why we're seeing a lot of looking to vintage clothing, vintage shopping, finding unique pieces. This focus as well on transparency and also trusting brands. So they claim to want that transparency, and they want to trust the brands as well, although maybe it's not mirrored in their behavior. But it's just interesting kind of how the two different generations react to similar circumstances in different ways.
Yeah, I also think that there's that generation is the children of my generation, right? So those are if I had my children, they would be that generation probably, right? And I think there's a very, very strong connection between parents and children today, right? Much stronger. So I was a key latch kid, right? Came home, mom wasn't home. She was out working, right? Didn't have a lot of time because that's the way it was. Mom and dad both worked, right? We're now in a generation where I do have a lot of my contemporaries who did stay home for a while, right? They just took a break from their career and went back. And so there's a very strong connection going on between the children and the parents, that generation. And those children like their mom and dads a lot.
That's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't made that connection. Yeah.
They really do. They like their mom and dads a lot. And by the way, mom's not old. Mom's cool. Yeah, and mom's wearing Levi's, right? Mom's wearing Levi's. So now their children want to wear Levi's because Levi's are cool. And so let's bring them back. But let's go shopping with mom, who can remind me what the late 70s, early 80s looked like, because that was me. And I'm going to bring it back. So I think that's where the nostalgia comes from. I also think that my generation does care about sustainability. Were we caring about sustainability? No, we were not. But I think what has happened is we've been a bit awakened by it and realizing that we're going through climate change, the waste that happens, and we're starting to pull back and say, wait a minute, do I really need 27 t-shirts that are all white in my closet? Could I spend a little bit more, get really high quality and buy 3 and let those 3 white t-shirts kind of rotate through? I also think my generation likes the ability to go in the closet and not have a lot of decisions. Like if you think about President Obama, he talked about how he had his gray suits because he didn't want to make too many decisions. And that is our generation. There's no doubt about it. My generation does not want to make a lot of decisions because they're making a lot of decisions all day. So I have a white blouse. I have a black blouse. I wear white and black all the time because I don't like to make a lot of decisions. Same thing. Everything matches. I know I don't have to think about it. I can pull it out of my closet. I can travel. I can do all of those kinds of things. But I do think, going back to your point, I think that generation really likes that nostalgia because they really like their parents and they're very close to them. Yeah.
Yeah. And they do shop in their parents' closets.
And they shop in their parents' closet. Who's a great one for that is who I love, Brooke Shields' daughters. Brooke Shields, who is my generation, we're the same age, who looks amazing. Her daughter on the runway, wearing her dresses on the runway and rocking them, looking beautiful.
Yeah, this is true. This is true.
Yeah.
And to tie it back to sustainability as well, because I definitely want your view on this, because as you've been working with some of the largest fashion companies, especially in North America. And I know a few years ago, sustainability was the topic. If you're not talking about sustainability, you are irrelevant. And now it's almost like we're seeing a withdrawal of that, a change in that strategy. So I would love your view of like when you were in these conversations with some of the top executives, when it was a priority, and now are you seeing like, what is their reaction kind of today?
Yeah. My own brand was made in the United States and I use sustainable fabrics. And it was really important to me. I think from my own perspective, and then I think a lot of these bigger brands are finding the same thing. It's expensive to be sustainable. It is. You have to really think about what you're going to do to reduce the water or not produce as many items, etc. Just get a drink of water. So because of that, I think on top of it, I think the customer, I don't know if they're really ready to spend the extra money. We've gotten very conditioned to buying that t-shirt for $5 or $10. And so you have to really think about what is important. And I think that gets a bit lost on the customer. The business of fashion, their state of fashion for 2025, they actually say that. And that the customer really has grappled with the challenge of, I want to be sustainable, but that means I got to spend a lot more money on my product that I'm buying. And can I afford it? And I think right now we have inflation, so our dollar's not going as far as we thought it was going to go. And, until we start to see leveling out between the two, I think that's still going to be a struggle. Now, because you live over in Paris, Europe has done a great job of saying, if you're going to ship something from the United States or wherever in plastic, you've got to have that carbon footprint of the plastic that the garment comes in for the bag. And they're going to start to do auditing and things like that. I think that's still top of mind. But I do think that was something. If there's a company out there that, let's face it, a Nike, an Adidas, or Adidas, a Tory Burch, these very, very large companies have the ability to figure out the parameters and the KPIs that come along with that plastic, right? They're able to gather that information in their ERP solution, and report on that. I think in the beginning it was going to be a struggle, but I think they've figured that out, right? So I think from my perspective, it's about how do the designers of these big brands stay focused on what sustainability means. And then it's a constant, which this happens in fashion anyway. You're constantly trying to figure out how to bring the cost down of a product. You're always figuring that out. And it's still going to happen with sustainability. But it's going to be a very slow adoption. It's going to take a lot for the consumer to say, okay, I'm going to buy a t-shirt for $63 instead of $10.
Yeah. And in Europe on the food here, they have, I don't know if you've ever seen it, they have like this rating system, A, B, C, D, E. And it's like A is green and you kind of move down and it becomes red. And when you're buying almost anything, if you're buying lunch meat, cheese, a number of different products, cookies, snacks, crackers, it all has this rating system on it. And it indicates to you, is it good or bad? And there's a lot of times when you want to get something and you're like it's E. Like you'll buy a chocolate bar and it will have the rating on it and you'll say like, oh, it's E. Like chocolate is not good for you, but because it has this E on it, you don't want to buy it. And so they are thinking right now to actually put this rating as well onto clothes. But I'm not sure that will have the same impact, because when I think about food, it's something you take inside your body. Like it feeds you, it nourishes you. Well, it's supposed to nourish you ideally. Whereas clothing, if you're buying from Shein, do you really not know that it's very unethical? I don't know. Like, do you think it would be a deterrent to consumers to have this kind of rating?
I think for some. And, when I was in Paris in October, I did a food walking tour and they talked about not only the ratings, but they also talked about, cheese gets a certain and meats get a certain sticker. So, where the region that they came from, and they have to be a certain amount of miles from a certain region to claim. They're just like champagne's from Champagne. Can't be from anywhere else. If it's not from Champagne, it's not Champagne. So same idea. And that was new for me. I didn't realize that. And right away I thought, oh, if I were living in, Paris, I would want to buy the cheese that's closest to Paris, right? I wouldn't want to buy cheese that came from, the farthest point away because it's not as fresh. But I don't think everybody thinks that way. And again, I don't think financially, especially in the United States, I mean, we have a very big problem with this. And why do people in a certain economic window shop differently than others, right? Because that's what they can afford. Because the better quality the food, the more expensive it is. And so, that's a tough one. And I think the same thing, the better quality the item, the more expensive it's going to be. I can even point to the blouse I have on. The blouse I have on, which you can't see, has all these buttons underneath it. So you don't have this gapping going on with the shirt. it took me forever to pull the trigger to buy this shirt. It was way more expensive than any other white blouse I would have ever bought. But every time I put it on, I'm like, I just think this is a great invention. I love this. And now I wear it all the time, right? And wouldn't think twice about it. But, you're always, when you're going to spend your hard-earned money, you do think about that. And so I think brands really have to think about what's the message. How are they getting the message across? Is it resonating? Are they doing the surveys? Are they doing the focus groups? And where is it that the consumer wants to push that needle? And I think a lot of times things become hot, right? Let's do sustainability. That's hot. But really it was a lot more than that. And so I think, you start to, those brands will start to, they've learned that it's even harder than they thought it was going to be to convince the consumer.
Yeah.
I think we'll get there. I don't know if it'll be in my lifetime, but it will get there. It will get there. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's still an important,
Very
important topic of conversation. I think it's, as far as the priorities go that are outlined in the report, it's one of the last priorities, but it's not off the list. So
No.
it's still on the list and people are still thinking about it.
And I think it'll ebb and flow. I mean, one of the things that we can talk about it with fashion, right? So fashion moves fast, hence the name fashion, right? I mean, they kind of go, they're synonymous with each other. You want fashion to change, right? You want something new. And technology does the same thing, right? Technology is very fast moving. Ironically enough, you can't really say that fashion brands are bleeding edge. Right? Bleeding edge adopters, right? It's not necessarily the area where you're going to go to and say, oh yeah, that's an early adopter. Fashion brands are definitely early adopters. Not necessarily, right? Because they're publicly traded companies and they have to think about their stockholders and they have to really think about where are they going to improve margin and improve, shareholder return. So, we've got a lot of competing points that happen when you're a publicly traded company. Now, those brands out there who are just coming up, and if they can start from the ground up, and you and I have witnessed quite a few of them, right? Rothy's, Allbirds, they're Everlane, right? They started out with, we're going to start this way. So they didn't have to shift. So it wasn't quite as hard. And those brands are entrenched in, it's about sustainability. It's about, I'm going to just continue to build the brand on this message. And I think we're going to continue to see those brands be adopted, grow, be successful. And I think folks who like those brands and attach themselves to them they're pretty loyal, right? They like to stay with them, so they like to support these brands.
And it goes to this idea too that you touched on a bit of value. Like you have the value of the product that you're buying, the value of the brand. Like what are you paying for? Are you getting the value that you want out of it? And also,
right.
Like that's maybe like a monetized value, but then there's also the value of the brand itself, like their meaning that they carry for somebody. And one of the things that I thought was pretty interesting from the report is this idea of the pricing, especially in luxury, is exorbitant. It's extremely high, and so now people are turning really to resale, to off-price segments, and the value that you get from these segments is actually the real value of, real, what is real value? But you can say that that's really how the new products should be priced. So this idea of innovation of inflation and trying to determine how do I spend my money? Where do I spend it? I want to be sustainable. I want to buy nice things. I can't really afford it. It's too expensive. So then you start looking into other segments like vintage and resale.
Because the quality is there, right? I mean, the thing that I think is never disputed, someone who's been in fashion my whole life, is that when you go buy And I'm just going to drop a name, Louis Vuitton bag. It is the highest quality. You know that they cut the leather a certain way. You know you're not going to see any kind of sewing going on over their LV. Uh, the artisans are tried and true and they know how to do this. And so that has carried down. So if I'm going to buy a pre-loved, I'll call it a pre-loved Louis Vuitton bag, I know it's going to be high quality. It might be a little stuffed up because the person who had it before me, really used it and decided, okay, I'm going to go buy a new one. So I'm going to take my old one and I'm going to sell it and somebody else will love it. And I think that brings a lot of joy. And it's interesting because I happen to be a Coach lover. I've been a Coach lover ever since I was love Coach.
Don't get me started.
I had some old bags of mine that I just didn't carry anymore. And I was thinking to myself, who's going to want these bags? I mean, they have been around. I mean, I had a gray bag that I probably had for 20 years. Who's going to want this bag? I went on Poshmark and I was so happy that I sold that bag for $35 because I knew the person who bought it is going to love it.
Do you know what's crazy? The fact that first of all, I went through a whole phase. I was buying $35 Coach bags on eBay. I think I have at least 10 of them because the quality of these bags, the old ones, was insane, like really insane. And so maybe I bought your bag. You never know.
You never know.
But it's true that it's unbelievable. Yes. Like if you compare the quality of some of the Coach bags that I have with like new ones that you can buy, which are nice, you're like, this leather feels like from another era sometimes. Like it's so, you'll have that like 4 generations, probably more.
Correct. Yeah. There's no doubt about it. I mean, and I think, again, that's that whole tie into the silver generation with the Gen Z, and they see that quality, right? So we were the ones who adopted it early. That Coach came out, and we were buying Coach bags. I mean, I remember saving my dollars for my very first Coach bag, and it was that traditional black with the handle on top. And, I wore that thing down so bad that the black had worn off the leather. I had white edges. And, I think, those of us who understand quality and really, we're repeating that with the younger generation. And I think that's why we're seeing a lot of resale happen. I think that's why, those organizations out there like the Real, ThreadUp, that's why they're doing fairly well. I think there's, look, so somebody's going to immediately say, Robin, they're not doing very well. They're going to send you a note. Yes, I know there's all these questions about, profitability and those are other things, right? That's very different. But what I'm saying about is, when I'm at a cocktail party or I'm at a party with my girlfriends and we talk about, we start talking about fashion and, I've got the latest and greatest handbag. Somebody's like, oh, yeah, well, I got it on the Real.
Yeah.
It's a resale bag,
Yeah.
So, and by the way, I sold my Burberry bag. That's why I bought a new one, right? I sold the $1,200 Burberry bag that I bought. That was about this big, and I used it twice and hadn't used it for quite some time. So I decided it was time. And hey, they resold that bag for $895, and I got a great commission on it. And I went back in and bought the next bag. So.
It keeps the wheels turning.
Quite a few of us who love that.
Yeah, I think it's huge. I mean, here in Europe, Vinted is huge. There's like I spent the last 3 days trying to find a Vinted locker to send something because they were all full. Like it's definitely being used quite a bit, and I think we would be remiss not to talk about another really big topic, and I think it ties to quality and also creativity, which is artificial intelligence. So I feel like right now maybe there is a lack of quality in a lot of different areas. Even creativity, there's a lack of creativity. And we have this opportunity slash threat. Maybe we can look at it, depends on if you're a glass half full or glass half empty person, but artificial intelligence has entered the chat. And so I would love your view on, like, what do you see as opportunity there? How can maybe quality and creativity be impacted by this?
Yeah. So my view on AI has changed. I will say, when I first started out, because, I've written quite a few articles, I was very much, wait a minute, AI should not be writing articles. They need to be coming from people, blah, 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 blah. And now I understand how AI should be used. So someone who's in technology, what did I do? I took a course. I did. I took a course on AI to understand where can AI benefit me on a daily basis and how do I want to use it. As we already mentioned, I have my own little assistant. I only have one right now. I'm probably going to have more than that because I'm also a painter. So I'm going to want painting ideas. I might want to introduce a side hustle. What should my AI assistant be doing? Is my AI assistant going to do everything, or do I want to silo them off? But I think, so a couple things I think are happening. So I think there was just like the metaverse, although the metaverse is now gone, but AI is a big push. AI has been around for a really long time. I wrote an article about it, since the 1950s. AI has been around for a long time. If you think about the Wizard of Oz and the Tin Man, he's the first example of an AI robot.
Is it really?
He was. Yes. Yep. So, when you think about that, it's really ebbed and flow. AI has been adopted. And then if you've ever watched the movie Hidden Numbers, and, they're in NASA and they bring in the big IBM, and, that's another example of, technology, doing new things, right? And crunching numbers. So we've had this AI around for a long time. What we haven't had is the ability to make it everybody's assistant. And that's the new that's happening. I saw a survey, and I said to you this earlier, I can't remember where I saw the survey, but AI is slowing down as adoption in the United States. And the article said that the reason it's slowing down is because people are not educated, and they're getting concerned about their jobs. And I certainly understand that. And I certainly understand change is hard for people. But I think that if you're not using an AI assistant, boy, you're just doing things you don't need to be doing over and over and over again. I mean, I don't know how many times I have to write the same email to a client, right? Let me just go to AI, and then I have it, and then I can reuse it, and I can put names in, and I can do that, right? Why do I need to actually physically send an invite? I should be able to
just automate
have
and
have it happen.
I found the survey. So it's from Salesforce, and it's from November 12th. So they say U.S. adoption is slowing in the last 3 months compared to a year ago when it was increasing by 8% each month.
So that's interesting. Yeah. So I think that's really interesting. I think companies have a responsibility to educate their employees on AI and how it can help them be more efficient. I think, so I myself took the AI class on Masterclass, highly recommended. I thought it was full of great tips and tricks, and a lot of great information that I found extremely valuable. It felt like it gave me the basics to be able to go in. I consider myself fairly creative anyway, so I was using ChatGPT, but not in this way. And so now I feel like I've leveled it up, and I'm excited to level it up another time. And I think that, we have to encourage everybody to use it. Now, within this masterclass, it talks about how to be ethical, to be sure that you check your data, to make sure that it's not spitting out something that doesn't make any sense, that you're actually giving it the data that it needs to be correct and to be ethical. And that is without a doubt extremely important. There was an article I think it was actually on TV, and this is a heartbreaking story. Heartbreaking story. A 14-year-old boy, unfortunately, he committed suicide because he was in love with a chatbot, an
Yeah.
AI chatbot. And that AI chatbot asked him when he asked, should I come to you? The chatbot came back and said, do you have a plan? Tell me your plan. And that 14-year-old boy committed suicide. And that was really, really sad. And unfortunately, that AI company did not have the guardrails in that would stop something like that happen. They're actually going to be obviously doing that. They're going to change that. The mother of this young boy is going to make sure that, the government has everything we need to put laws in place. And that's the fear, I think, with AI. This is a very, very sad story, and the only reason I bring it up is because it's really important that we're ethical. It's really,
Yeah.
really important that the guardrails are in place, and we don't go off and think, that
Well,
AI is going to solve everything.
well, I think that's part of the problem is that the guardrails really aren't in place. I think the people who are even working on AI sometimes don't fully understand how is it generating all this information? Like, how truly is it working? So I think
Right.
there's definitely, I think a certain amount of fear is good because things
Agreed.
that happen, like with this little boy that you're talking about, like that can never happen. That should never happen. And
Never happen, and it should never happen again, ever. Yeah, it
no,
was
because it should
horrible.
really be a utility. That's, I mean,
Yes.
from my point of view, it's a tool. It should be a tool. It should be a
Yeah.
utility that you use. I think it's quite powerful. I think that it can be quite emotional too, which is like I had seen something about a girl. She was asking every time she fought with her boyfriend, she was asking ChatGPT, "What should I do in this situation?" So you can really actually consult with it about pretty much any area of your life, even
Yes.
ones that you wouldn't share even with your best friends or your family. And looking at it really through the lens of it should be a tool, it should be used as such, people should be trained to use it as such, just like maybe you wouldn't use some other tools for some strange purposes. Maybe don't use ChatGPT for those strange purposes.
Yeah.
And I thought it was interesting that Sam Altman, who's CEO of OpenAI, founder as well, just in case you don't know, but I'm pretty sure everyone knows, he had given an interview, I don't know, maybe a year or two ago, and he was saying, if you had asked me 10 years ago, I would have said that AI is going to do things like replace manual labor, replace the things that nobody wants to do, things that are repetitive. And he said the last thing that I would think would have been replaced is creativity. But what he had said was actually, we're seeing the opposite. What it's replacing rather quickly is creativity. And that's I had been using it a lot for marketing copy, for ideas for campaigns, for generating images, for design ideas. And I don't know that anything that it put out was anything you could actually say, like, this is the final product. But it certainly was like, oh, well, I never thought when I had this idea and I explained it to the AI, I had not envisioned what the AI had produced. And so I think that serves as like inspiration and can fuel creativity. But everything does have as good as it gets, it also has a dark side as well.
Yeah, and I think the piece of the puzzle about AI that we didn't even touch on, and it's about human. It's about our connection. Unfortunately, we went through the pandemic, right? And we learned how to be alone, but that's not what we were meant to do as human beings. We're meant to be connected. We're meant to be in the room with each other. We're meant to interact with one another. And AI is never going to replace the human touch or the human interaction, right? Or the actual, can I see an emotion on somebody's face and see the reaction? They're always going to be the best of them, of their tool, of that tool, right? AI is always going to represent itself as the best as AI is, because it's a tool. It's not a person, right? And I think we want, back to right in the very beginning we talked about, we want transparency, we want the truth, we want science backed, and we want to be interacting with people, right? And that's really what we want. And that's why people love fashion, because we love the fashion shows. We love to see how items look on people. We want to go and experience the runway or go shopping. It's a social event. And we want to wear the latest and greatest, hey, I've got really super wide leg jeans on because they are rocking it right now and I love them, right? And hey, a year from now I might be picking bootlegs, but I get excited with the latest fashion, and that's really what fashion's all about, right? It's to inspire, it's to bring out that creativity, it's to really use the fashion to express who you are. And whether you're buying really high-end labels or you decide, what, that's not really where I'm going to fit, and I really like, going for vintage and I'm going to buy everything vintage, you're expressing yourself, and you're speaking your truth, and you're representing, right? And you're representing yourself, and that's something to embrace. So
I think that's a perfect note to end on, to go back, what's the true meaning of fashion? I think that's definitely something that we all, that's why I think we all love it, right? So couldn't agree with you more. And Robin, thank you so much for joining me today. I had so many other questions for you, so maybe we'll have to do another one.
I think we should do a part 2. I think that'll be fun.
Yeah, I think that will be fun too. But thank you so much for joining, and we'll see you soon.
Sounds great. Thanks so much.